Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ventures Podcast. I'm excited about today's episode with Mike Anderson. He has been on the show before, but in today's episode, we are able to talk about Banyan DAO. Banyan DAO.xyz is a new decentralized autonomous organization with an upcoming training day event on April 29th. So at the time of this release, it will be just less than 2 weeks away. So mark your calendar. So we talk about this event. So in this episode, we talk about the history of Banyan DAO, what Banyan DAO is, what this training day is, and what the DAO is doing after April 29th in terms of building products and services in Web3 with a community of entrepreneurial leaders to promote human flourishing. And what's neat about Banyan DAO is we have, and I'm a member as well, we have a way of compensating members based on their work and giving tokens. The system is called Coordinape, and Coordinape allows the community of people participating in the DAO to just give tokens to others that they see doing work in the DAO. And Banyan DAO has actually rewarded Mike significantly for the way that Mike has helped facilitate, and not in a top-down CEO kind of way, but help facilitate the coordination of lots of different teams in order to accomplish a bunch of different things that are going on within Banyan DAO. So I get the opportunity actually to ask him specifically about what that process has been like, how he thinks about it structurally, ways that you can get involved in Banyan DAO, even if you just have a couple of minutes a week, or if you want to get more significantly involved, and how you can get compensated for that. So visit banyandao.xyz. I'll put the links in the show notes and also links to the upcoming training day event so you can get registered. So if you're listening to this episode, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com. There I'll have even more extensive show notes to the things that we talk about today. And if you're watching, you can also listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures. So with that, please enjoy this episode with Mike Anderson. All right, Mike, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Will.
I'm glad we can do this dedicated episode specifically on Banyan DAO, specifically on the training day event that we're doing on April 29th of this year. And so for those who aren't familiar, at least from my perspective, I'm curious, Mike, to get your perspective as well. But from my perspective, this all started, Banyan DAO started because I and others noticed that most of the Learn Web3, the quote unquote Learn Web3 resources out there were really tailored to software engineers, which is great. We need people who understand how to build with Solidity and Rust and WebAssembly, and there's now Agoric has JavaScript. There's lots of different ways to build smart contract-based decentralized web applications. However, anyone who's used Web3 applications have realized the experience is a little clunky. And in fact, the paradigms at which we build Web3 applications is very different than it is in Web 2. So the thought was, hey, why don't we just throw a train? Why don't we get together a group of about 10 people who are interested in leveling up from Web 2 product managers? And we use that term holistically as people who design, who architect, and who manage products. And I have a number of different episodes that I'll put in the show notes about for actual product managers that I've interviewed. But we wanted to basically level up people who are Web 2 product managers into Web 3 product managers. And the response was overwhelming because I'm probably overly optimistic. I ended up letting in more than 10 people. We quickly shut down the Discord and then decided what to do. Out of that is where we decided to form a DAO. I think is that history, Mike? Where do you enter this story? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to that. I mean, the first thing is just, it became really clear in 2021 that like crypto wasn't just about money, right? But that there's a whole bunch of things that it could do. We saw like when you and I were starting Code Fellows together, there was somebody who was mining crypto in the basement. And I think that they got like 20 Bitcoins or something like that. And at the time that was worth a couple $1,000 and it was interesting, but we watched it go wild. Then in 2021, we watched NFTs. Like I had a few friends that were like, hey, trust me on this. This is how social status works in the new world. And they're like, watch these three different projects, they're going to go wild. And it was like Bored Apes, it was Punks, and it was like one or two others. And I watched friends who could see the world that way ride the wave. And so when I saw those first two things happen, and then I understood what DAOs were. DAOs are basically a way to be able to get a group of people who don't know or trust each other to be able to set up governance and treasury and be able to make decisions together. I was like, oh, now this is speaking my love language. I understand exactly how this can work. If we have a mission and a vision together, we now have all the tools that it takes to be able to align a whole bunch of strangers in a direction. And so I think when I saw what you had been doing with the product manager group, and I saw the success you had with Figment, and like you could see that, I started saying like, well, what if we do this bigger than just like a class? What if we do this as an actual DAO? Yeah. Because it's really a network that we're forming, right? So if you think about all the social apps of, that we had 10, 15 years ago, those were forming networks that somebody else owned. It's like, oh, we can go in with like 100 of the smartest people I know and form our own network. Oh, now that's how we can do something interesting. And so that's where I started pushing for, let's make a DAO.
Love it. Yeah. And in Q4 2021, I had a number of different people on the show. There's one of them was essentially me doing a 10-minute monologue about the need for Web3 product managers. That still actually has a bunch of people who see that. I don't remember which channels it's being syndicated on, but who are interested in learning. And I myself started interviewing people in the DAO space, right? I mean, being in Web3 for a number of years now and investing pretty heavily since 2017, I'd always known about DAOs. I'd always sort of understood and really admired MakerDAO. Like, if you were to talk to me the last 5 years, I probably would have talked about MakerDAO, the way they've been able to hold the value of DAI pegged to the US dollar, which is actually quite remarkable. That's a whole nother episode. And, we'd all known about the classic DAO hack, less than a year after Ethereum launched, et cetera, et cetera. But it wasn't until Q4 that I started getting more serious about it. A number of different people I had on the show were involved with DAOs. And it started to make sense to me that there was actually a difference between a DAO that you vote based on the amount of coin that you own and a DAO that was permissioned, that you had to be voted in to join the DAO, and that your proposals on chain could automatically move coin from address A to address B based on the result of a proposal. That is cool, because a lot of the DAOs out there are just, your voting weight is based on the coin that you own. It's done on the snapshot. At least up until recently, Snapshot was actually an off-chain. It just took snapshots literally of the on-chain, calculated the votes off-chain, and then the owners of these DAOs, the people who are managing them, were trusted to take action based off of the result of whatever Snapshot said. Well, wouldn't it be cooler if that was all done automatically? And this is when I interviewed Spencer Graham, learned more about DAO House as a low-code, no-code tooling system for DAOs, setting up these Moloch-style DAOs. And then I went very deep into the DAO rabbit hole, read Alexandra Sims' PhD thesis on DAOs, talked to even more people. I was able to interview Dr. Sims on this show. From an academic perspective around the ability to harness, like, what does it look like from a legal, practical, tooling, jurisdiction issues, tax issue, et cetera, et cetera. But what I really was impressed by, Mike, is how you stepped up and helped coordinate lots of different things going on within Banyan DAO from the very beginning. And the community has voted accordingly. Like, the community, based on our giving economy, which we should talk about in the show, the community rewarded you based on what they were seeing that you were doing and adding value to what we were up to. So I know we talked about this in a previous episode, but would you mind and even the way that the model has evolved a little bit, would you mind just sharing with us how are you coordinating these 100 plus smart people that we're bringing in and trying to get things done? Like, what does that even look like?
Yeah. So it's interesting. You start off with like 10 or 20 people in chaos, right? And you got to think, like, how do we remove the chaos as we scale? And so the first way that we did that is we used an event as a forcing mechanism for us to get everything together in time, right? So if you think about, hey, let's put an event on the calendar, April 29th. that day is going to come, right? And so like the pressure starts building. People are like, oh, well, we have to be able to plan an event, get speakers, promote the event. Oh, but we also like need to have a website for Banyan DAO, and we need to have a DAO for Banyan DAO. And we, you know, like you basically work backwards and say, what are all the things that we need to do in order to pull off this event? And so we did that. We got together as a group. Like one of the cool things about DAOs is that it's not leaderless just because it's decentralized. Actually, leadership is more important. It's leadership over a specific section. And so we got people to be the leader over who's going to who's going to create the actual DAO and do all the technical work, who's going to do the event planning, who's going to figure out how we do project management, right? So we broke that up and gave people basically a lane to run in, and we met together every week. And what that did is that gave us kind of our 1.0 version. And then what we did is we created like if you have an org chart in a traditional organization, that's because you're basically creating a control mechanism here where the person at the top can help make a decision on how we're going to steer the whole thing, right? What we did instead is we built it almost like a process map that looks like an organism. So if you imagine like an organism that has a mouth, right? Like that's our external communications because we need to go reach out to people. And then we have a welcome team that helps bring people in. And then we have an internal communications team that helps make sure that everybody in the org knows what they're doing. And by doing that, we're flipping that org chart upside down. And so if you think about it, a tree is basically an org chart flipped upside down. And it's about empowerment as opposed to control. And so we're having to rethink management from an empowerment standpoint. And it's been a lot of fun. And, you know, a lot of the stuff has, it's been great to see people from all over the world. Every continent except Antarctica at this point in time is now working together. So it's working so far. We got to see, can it scale past 250? Like what's going to happen between now and 500? We've got a lot of lessons to learn.
So yeah, this is great. So for those that aren't familiar with Banyan DAO, we're a group of people that are leveling up into Web3, but it's really all about promoting human flourishing via this community of entrepreneurial leaders that we have, right? And the tree metaphors, the organic metaphors, the forest metaphors, I think are really, really powerful to help us to that end, because a banyan tree is a tree that plants other trees, and then the trees are all connected in this beautiful sort of forest network. So this training day coming up, could you talk a little bit about that? Like what is it? How can people sign up for it? Who's it for? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're the kind of person who wants to understand where technology's headed, it's probably important to your job to do so. Or if you want to jump in to become a product manager, right now is your opportunity to get ahead of a whole group of people, because even if you've got 10 years of experience as a Web 2 product manager, that doesn't automatically mean you're going to be successful in this new area. So this is really an opportunity time. It's a time for people who are product managers and who want to be product managers to go learn this new stack so that they can go thrive. Now the stack's different, right? Because if you think about like what it took to be like a Procter and Gamble product manager to I'm now a product manager at Facebook, those are very different jobs. And the technology and the distribution models and the economic models kind of evolved over a period of time. Now we're at this spot where Web3 is exploding, and there's so many companies. Like I have no idea how many unicorn companies there are in Web3 at this point in time, but I mean it's dozens, if not hundreds, right? Like yeah. It's absolutely wild. So there's all these roles as these companies quickly grow, where we need product people to understand these new technologies. We need to understand how the decentralized, like the crypto side of things work, but also the usability. Like, how is this going to affect the user? And it's totally different, right? Like you and I were just talking about a bad user experience that you had this weekend that if you hadn't understood could have cost you serious dough. But like product managers now need to understand all of the security issues around decentralized and what we're going to need to do for that. And then lastly, community becomes this huge piece of it, because people aren't just customers on the other side of a screen from you. They're actually participating in your startup as a company and product, but also your expansion strategies. And so the community is actually built into the marketing. So as a product manager, you're going to have to switch the way that you think about a product.
Yeah.
and it's going to have to include the community. And that's what you're going to learn at this event from people who are actually doing it. We've got some like probably some of the foremost people in the field, like Jason Shaw from Alchemy. He's written a lot that a ton of people have pointed to him as being like the most like the front runner in product management, thought leadership in Web3. We've got Petar Antonovsky, who's at Celsius Networks, and Yannick Falla from Figment. And then, you think about things like legal, right? Like legal becomes a really important thing for a product person to understand. And we've got Angela Wilson, who's there, and she's helped. I don't know. She said like most of the L1s that exist today, she's helped start up. Like we have some really great people. And so if you want to spend one day and like get 3 months worth of knowledge, that's going to be a good day to spend with us.
So people can just go to banyondao.xyz, right? I'll put the links in the show notes. And there are different ways to pay, what are those mechanisms? If we can share that with folks here.
Yep. So we still have the ability to pay with a legacy Web2 system, if especially if your company is going to reimburse it for you. We wanted to make that easy, so you can pay with a credit card. You can also pay with cryptocurrency into the Banyan DAO treasury directly. And then if you're the kind of person who, if you have a financial need to be able to join this, we don't want money to be an issue for you. So please feel free to join our Discord and introduce yourself and like help us understand what your need is. It might be like, hey, I can only afford half of this. It might be, hey, I'm in a country where $500 is like 6 months rent. And to those people, we want to make sure that you can get in. And we don't want money to be an issue. So please come introduce yourself. Like at Banyan DAO, we're all about equity and diversity. So we want you there. Please don't let money be an issue.
Yeah. So what kind of outcomes would you say are expected from this April 29th training day event?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're going to get to meet and get a social network of people who are in this space, which in my opinion is the most valuable thing that you can have, because now like you'll see faces. You'll have access to a Discord where you can talk to all these people in the coming weeks and months afterwards. So now you're going to have a group of people that when it becomes necessary for you to understand Web3, you're going to know who to talk to. Mm-hmm. First of all. Number two, the people who are in our DAO are builders, right? Like I think we have like 4 or 5 project proposals for different like entire startups basically that we're looking at kicking off for season 1. And so you've got a group of people who you could just go and you could be on a team, and you could be on a team with 3 hours a week, or you could be on a team with 30 hours a week. And that's totally acceptable in this world, right? And so you could meet people who will onboard you to actual opportunities and projects. And then, the knowledge that you're going to get from getting to hear like 3-4 person discussions from people who've spent like 1 to 7 years in this space already. There aren't many places that you can go and experience that, especially with such a focus on product management.
I love it. First of all, it's a really great summary. I like that. So for people that are let's say you're just listening to this podcast or watching it for the first time, and you're interested in joining Banyan DAO, how do you get involved? Like, how do you know whether to attend this training day or not? What do you mean by preseason, season 1? Like, what's up with all that?
So the easiest thing to do is to join our Discord and introduce yourself. Because when you do that, I'm going to reach out to you personally, and I'm going to say, hey, let's meet. So twice a week now. Right now, it's on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We might change it up in a few weeks. But I'll send you a calendar invite. We'll meet. I've got a deck that I walk you through that gets you up to speed, and then I'll help you get plugged into whatever your goal is. There's something there at Banyan DAO that we can get you plugged into, and I'll help make sure that it helps you reach your own goals.
So this preseason then is essentially everything from Q4 last year all the way up to this April 29 training day event. And that's sort of like preseason is like setting up, getting our on-chain treasury management on DAO House, getting our giving economy set up with Coordinape, getting our communications set up on Discord, our wiki with Notion. This is a kind of a standard stack for DAOs.
Yeah.
And then that's the preseason, right? And then season one is starting after that.
Exactly. Yeah. And we called it preseason because when we started it, we didn't even have a DAO, right? It was like we didn't even have a way to be able to compensate people with tokens. We had nothing in place. And so that's why we called it preseason. And it turns out that like, you know, like a basic tenet of control theory is like you basically have some variables you're in control of and others you aren't. And you have to figure out how to organize.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't have an org chart where like people have control over one another, what we do have control over is time. And so by using the season planning, what that does is that gives us a rhythm, almost like I think it's called a metronome for music, so that we can all coordinate our actions together and we can coordinate planning, you know, like that's kind of an alignment phase. We can coordinate our actions. And then we can also coordinate our assessment so that we can all look back at the last 90 or 120 days and make sure that the lessons learned don't stay back, you know, in history, but actually go with us forward. Because as we grow, we're basically creating a learning organism, and we have to figure out how to learn as a group. And so those seasons really help us to be able to get discrete windows to look back on and understand how we're growing and understand how to change in the future.
So I've been inside a bunch of these discords for DAOs. I've been following a bunch of DAOs on Twitter and kind of the commentary around it. It seems like the way that a lot of these DAOs are going is it's a relatively small group of people that do a bunch of the work. There's then X number of people that have kind of like me that have come into the Discord but aren't necessarily doing much on all the other DAOs. How are you thinking about the process of growing? You know, you said you mentioned teams and leaders of those teams, but how for somebody that only has 15 like minutes a week that they want to pop in and add some value and have a little, you know, have a bit of the give and take, right? They can take by learning, they can take by asking questions, or even actually asking a question is actually a nice give. But even if you're just on there and just reading the different commentary that's going on, but somebody wants to give, but they have limited time. How are you thinking about from a facilitating point? Because I know that every DAO wrestles with this. How are you helping that person with limited time throughout the week actively engage with the DAO?
Yeah. So right now, the main spot that you could, like, if you really only had 15 minutes a week, we have a channel in our Discord called Web3 Basics. And that's where we both share interesting articles and things that we're learning about. And so in there, you're going to find things that people who are learning about Web3 are sharing because they think it's going to be helpful to others. So it's a really curated, good place to go. Now, if you had a little more than 30 minutes or 15 minutes a week, because that's like basically check in and look at some stuff. We actually have the ability to like be part of a Twitter live stream once a week on Thursday afternoons. We also have a whole bunch of teams that you could actually be a part of, and you could just even volunteer to take notes for the meeting, or you could, let's see, what else could you do? We're kind of in this space where we're actually, one of the problems is the tasks are too big. So I'm working with all the leaders to start breaking the tasks down further, because we want to make it so that after you come to that welcome meeting, if you said like, hey, I have 30 minutes, we would have like a set of 5 options where you could just literally pick one and just go for it. Because we want to get people, like a video game, we want to get you experiencing it and leveling up almost without effort or without thinking about it. We want to make it really smooth and seamless. So we are working on that. It's not there yet.
Yeah. Because there's other mechanisms, right? Of just like liking a tweet or tweeting something, or even just asking a question. You know, that kind of way of participating. And then, but here's the kicker, right? How we've mentioned Coordinape, but can you explain a little bit more about how our like, you can't just go buy a bunch of governance tokens in our DAO, right? Can you explain how compensation for work, even a small amount of work, happens within Banyan DAO?
Yeah, totally. So it's actually really interesting. So we have a difference between governance and treasury, right? Like if you went to a normal company, like 1 share equals 1 share maybe, and like you can buy and sell that share. But with us, treasury is separated. And so our governance is actually how we have our Coordinape set up, and they're called give tokens. And so every month I get 5,000 give tokens, Will gets 5,000 give tokens. Everybody who's a participant and a contributor gets 5,000 give tokens. And we each put in like, hey, here's the projects we worked on. Here's the processes we oversaw. Here's how I contributed. and we get to allocate those 5,000 tokens to the community based on how we see their contribution
Right.
adding value, basically.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
can't keep any of my own. Mike can't keep any of like no individual person can keep their own give tokens. In order
Yep.
to receive give tokens, you have to give, which sets up a really now that we're coming on at the end of our third epoch, right? And so
Yep.
we've done a couple of them, and it seems from my perspective that that it has actually been a really compelling way to um, diversify the token, right? A lot of DAOs and a lot of L1 projects, L2 projects, et cetera, talk about their token distribution model, right? How are you airdropping? How are you spreading the love, so to speak? And I think by us having this coordinate system, which kudos to the Yearn finance team for setting this up, right? I mean, it's part of it is we're just trying to leverage and borrow and copy and empower the different tools that others have used, which is kind of that whole, Balaji said that the whole space is all about winning and help win, like win and help win. So we're taking the best practices from other DAOs. I think we've been told that a lot of our welcome team processes and others, the way that we're organizing, other DAOs are now starting to use. So there's this really cool sharing economy, not only within Banyan DAO, but with all the DAOs that we're a part of. So can you name drop a little bit, actually, some of the DAOs that we are coordinating with and cooperating with?
Yeah, so the folks that we're closest with are the Product Guild at Developer DAO. So they've got, I think, like maybe 4,000 to 6,000 developers who are all part of a DAO. They've been going for a bit longer than us, but we've been working really closely with their product folks and have many of their product folks who are also in our DAO. And the thing that's really cool about that is we have something, even though we're only like 100 days old right now, like we're 108 days old today, something like that. And we're actually older than their product guild, even though they have a very advanced, large group. And so they're learning from us. And it allows us to be able to each give towards each other and help further each other's goals. And the thing that's really cool is like, there's a concept called composability, which basically means like in Web3 that you can like take two different tools or two different processes and piece them together. And if they're open source, then we can share them, right? So if our welcome process is totally in the open, other people can take that. And so what it does is by working together, we're actually able to put out more tools, more processes, and we're able to test them. And since we all share, we all learn a lot faster.
So what if somebody wanted to, starting in May here, right, is season 1.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody, you said there's 4 or 5 different projects, but if somebody wanted to submit a proposal for a new project and wanted to bring people in and around Banyan DAO to help participate to make a new project, right, a new DAO or a new Web3 project of one form or another, how would they do that?
Yeah, so if you come in and say hi in the Discord, like that's probably the first thing, right? Because this is a social thing. Like you don't want to just come in and be like, hey, I'm the genius that you don't know. Here's my perfect plan, right? What you do want to do is come in and say, hey, I've got a plan. Like I'm working on this project. Like start to circulate the concept. And there's a thing called we basically have a one pager that we have a template. So it's like take your idea from your head and put it into a way that's easy for everybody to digest. Put that out there and say like, hey, I'm going to have a kickoff meeting next week at this time. Or you could even do a poll like who's interested in kickoff meeting. And then we bring people together and we get groups of people who are interested in the same thing to take that project start doc and turn it in, like basically explore everything that's possible, right? Brainstorm, think of what we could do, then get down to a plan, right? Because like a plan is often like times taking all the things you could do and finding out the best things that you should do. Yeah. So we do that as a group. And then we're going to have an official season 1 project group that we're hopefully next week going to approve. We'll see if we can get that done in time. That's a lot of work to get finalized before the event, but I'd really love to get it finalized. So we're like, hey, here's the 3 or 4 projects that we're officially doing. That doesn't mean that we can't do things on the side. We just need to try to keep on the season planning as much as possible so that as we grow, our budgeting seasons and those sorts of things can kind of all happen together. And so it's like creating a discipline of a full group of people planning and executing in tandem, coordinated by time.
All right. So a final question. Of all the topics that we're going to be covering in the training day event, right? Because we're going to talk about Web 1, 2, 3. We're going to be talking about what does it mean to be a product manager. We're going to be talking about the nuts and bolts of what Web 3 is, and then some sort of practical way of empowering people to get started with their own projects. Of all the topics and all the different things and all the different speakers that we're going to be talking about, which one or ones are you most excited about?
Gosh, that's hard. The one that I think is going to be the most valuable is the legal one, because we're basically saying, hey, we're doing a lot of the legal work on a theory of contract, or on a contract that's on a smart contract, and that changes a lot of how you approach a business, and understanding what the international and national legal system is and how it understands this work is really going to be important for anybody building in this space. But on top of that, the thing that I'm that's going to be the most helpful. The one I'm really excited about, though, is hearing Yannick Falla and Jason Shaw on the Web 2 to Web 3 PM journey, because they're the people who've actually been doing this for years. And like, we've gotten to speak with a lot of folks who've been doing it for like a year or two, but like getting to hear them talk about like going from almost zero to multi-billion-dollar Web 3 companies, like that's going to be really interesting to hear.
Nice. All right. So where can people learn more about Banyan DAO? Where can people follow us on the socials? How can people get a hold of you? You know, we've touched on it. Would you mind just sort of recapping all that?
Yeah, sure thing. So if you go to banyandao.xyz, that's where you can find our website. That gives you access to our Discord, which is where we all talk. That'll link out to our Twitter, which is just @BanyanDAO. And then if you want to find me, I'm just Twitter's where I'm most active. So @Mikey Anderson, MIKEY Anderson.com. You can find me there.
All right, Mike, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you in your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it'd be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.